this season, so we each find our place as God summons us to be mold breakers. And 2 Corinthians in particular, I think, gives us a chance to talk about breaking an inner mold. So sometimes we feel like, the world's crushing us, but 2 Corinthians points to the mold that we have sometimes about how we think about ourselves and think about situations. And that is a mold that needs to get broken so that God can pour in some more grace. So we definitely see that today. So 2 Corinthians, the title sounds familiar if you've been around the block with us the last couple of months, Corinthians. So same writer of a letter, Paul, same recipients of a letter, the people, a church in Corinth. But the vibe of 2 Corinthians is so different. It's a more subdued vibe. There's just some really deep stuff going on in 2 Corinthians. I was thinking, 1 Corinthians, Paul comes across as a kind of teacher, and the Corinthians are kind of students. In 2 Corinthians, Paul comes across as maybe a bit of an undermined leader, and the people of Corinth seem more just kind of disturbed or questioning. It's kind of like the natural fact of how communities grow or process things. It's kind of like the honeymoon is over in the relationship between Paul and the Corinthians. A couple of years have passed, and there's some bad juju that's gone down. And it's kind of a mystery trying to figure out what happened between Paul and the church in Corinth. Something happened. So all of you who like detective stories or mysteries, read 2 Corinthians and try to figure it out for yourself. There's various clues along the way. Something happened in their relationship. There was some sort of terrible misunderstanding, but some repair has also happened. But Paul is very careful about how he writes to them this go-round. And because of their struggle, we can deepen too as a community. So we experience this right away in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. As you saw, as we read the text, there was the repeated use of the word consolation or comfort. It happens about 11 times. Comfort, comfort, comfort. And 12 times there's the word affliction or struggle. What was that? Struggle. So he says that over and over again. Comfort and struggle. He balances it out over and over again. So a lot of times in these old letters or essays, the writers kind of give you a clue what the whole letter is about at the beginning of the letter, like what are the great themes. So indeed, a great theme of 2 Corinthians is this struggle and this comfort. So welcome to 2 Corinthians, or my new nickname for 2 Corinthians is Riding the Struggle Bus with Paul. So when you read 2 Corinthians, you can get a sense of, yep, I'm riding the struggle bus with Paul. What do I mean by that, the struggle bus? So watch for it as you read it. Maybe you'll see it too, the struggle bus. So in 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about his physical struggles. He has some sort of thorn in his side, so maybe he has some sort of physical ailment. He also talks about how he's been abused and harmed by the society around him. He's gotten beat up. We heard a little bit about that in 1 Corinthians 15 last week. It sounds like Paul was thrown to the wild beasts, which was that crazy society's idea of tormenting people who had different beliefs. So, and then later in Corinthians, we'll see Paul just say all the different physical torments he's faced. And he's also faced just the struggle of thinking differently than everybody else. So, and he says, this is how it goes. This is how we roll. Jesus, because of who he loved and how he loved, was a threat to some parts of his religion and society and other people. So Paul takes up Jesus' struggle in his work. So in addition, though, to Paul's physical torments and social, theological torments, he has a terrible relationship pain going on. And I was thinking, this is a pain that most of us have borne at some point in our lives. It's almost like Paul and the Corinthians almost went through a divorce and or just a completely broken relationship. And this relationship pain has caused Paul so much torment. And we see that seeping through. It is a big part of his struggle bus. So he's had physical pain, he's had social pain, he's had the pain and the struggle of thinking differently than the society around him as an act of justice and change. But the thing that's really tormenting him in 2 Corinthians is relationship pain. So I go back to what happened between Paul and that church. There was some kind of misunderstanding, and did it get blown out of proportion, and then did other things happen, and it just escalated, and then people started reading into each other's actions, so the conflict escalated. In another place, we'll see Paul talking about maybe there was a particular individual who in that church was undermining Paul and convincing people of something else. He was very troublesome. So a troublesome person there kind of created torment in that relationship. It was very, very horrible. So, So when Paul is, first of all, Paul is riding the struggle bus. I mean, isn't that great to hear? We may think that when we're in struggle, we're somehow defective, we've done something wrong. We play a little game called blame. We blame ourselves, or we blame somebody else, or we absorb somebody else is blaming us. And it's a terrible, terrible psychic pain that we can go through. So Paul has gone through that psychic pain, but he has processed his struggle a little bit more, and so we get clues for ourselves of how to ride the struggle bus. So, number one, Paul names it. He has struggled, and it's been a struggle in the relationship. So Paul is very authentic, he's very honest about how awful and searingly painful the break in their relationship has been. And it's changed his travel plans, it's changed his words, it's changed so many things. It is just this real, present, terrible brokenness. And, prayers for all of us today who've been through something or are going through such relational psychic pain. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayers. So Paul keeps it real that this has happened, and we'll talk about how he's processed it. And he is still processing it. He's kind of testing out some language like, are we really okay here? I think there's enough repair. You guys all right? And so he's taking the next steps of the relationship to see if they've broken through and maybe are at a different level of community together. So Paul in his struggle, he struggled. He is honest about it. He talks about it. And then he shares what has helped him in his struggle. And I'd say an anchoring concept in chapter 1 is Paul's understanding of God. Who is God? Paul starts by saying, the God of mercy, the God of consolation. Over and over again, Paul points to a God who is wired to console. He says in his attacks in Ephesus, there's a couple of verses there that are so awful that they were attacked in Asia, were they, thrown to the wild beasts, were they beat up, horrible situation there. He said we felt crushed. We were despairing and we thought we had a sentence of death. We thought it was completely over. And what kept them going was not their own strength and not their own pretending like nothing's wrong. What kept them going was their knowledge and their hope in a God. What does this God do? This God raises the dead. That kept them going amid their terrible, terrible suffering. So when Paul is suffering, he keeps it real, he talks about it, he processes it, and he talks about the God of consolation in the middle of horrible, horrible, horribleness. When you read chapter 1, it feels like, or the first 11 verses in particular, it feels like this complicated web of consolation and affliction. 11, a dozen times, back and forth, back and forth. And Paul, in his struggle, observes that there's this God of consolation who consoled him and his group, where they are in Ephesus and in Asia. This God of consolation honestly consoled them at their depths. But there was a purpose in it. Not just, I was thinking, this idea of God being a consoler, this is not abstract stuff. It's real. So that we don't just say, oh, God is a consoling God. No, it's real for Paul. God's consolation made a huge impact. It kept him going in this terrible arena, this frying pan. So this consolation made a huge difference. So a God of consolation, comfort, Paul received that. It gave him strength in the fight, in his battle. So Paul received it. And then Paul said, there was a purpose there. So it's not just God's up there doing his thing and God made me feel better. It was so that I might console you all in Corinth. And God might use me and all of us as consolation. Not consolation from our own goodness and humanity and, oh, isn't that nice? Oh, that person's so kind. No, it's a different level of consolation. It's a consolation that originated with God. So human beings are jars. We're just these jars that have the capacity of receiving God's consolation. And it is just the best stuff in the world, God consolation. Not normal consolation, God consolation. So, I was thinking when we are in our suffering, it's terrible, physical suffering, horrible, horrible, horrible thing. And it's very easy and it's very human to just focus on our suffering because it's just terrible. The wedge that we have as Christians is that we have a belief that there is a God of consolation, and it's not an abstract concept. We believe in a God of consolation, and we believe in a God who suffered and understands suffering. You know, Jesus Christ, the cross, hello, suffering. You know, God, Jesus is our pioneer in understanding what a good, true, righteous life is, standing up for what is good, independent of what anybody else believes. So, you know, in our struggles, we have this wedge of consolation that has proven across, you know, eons to be a game changer in how we live our lives, how we bear suffering. And then from our experience of being consoled, we have something to give to other people, God consolation. And I think this is actually what good news is. So there's this concept in Christianity, good news. And sometimes when we hear good news as modern Christians, you know, mainline Protestants, it can kind of sound a little bit hokey or churchy or what's good news. And for some Christians, good news is this thing you cram down people's throats. Good news. Do you know the good news? As if they have the good news and you don't have it. And the good news thing can be a power trip, a superiority thing. But here in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, the good news thing is just this gift that a human received in suffering, this consolation, this jar within our souls that got filled with manna, with oil, with something, with power. It's a very humble thing. And for us, I hope as Discovery Church and as readers, close readers of the Bible, we know that we can receive this consolation and then we can't help but give that consolation away. And it's a humble thing. It's a vulnerable thing. It's a game-changing thing. You know, church, maybe another definition for it is riding the struggle bus together. Riding the struggle bus together is church. What does it mean to ride the struggle bus together? Well, first of all, there's struggle, and then there's riding the struggle bus. You know, struggle kind of could get tied to, say, rugged individualism. Like, I've got this, I can't get help, I'm going to look bad or vulnerable or weak if I get help. Riding the struggle bus is a form of intelligence that says, struggle's been going on a long time. I am not alone in struggle. And in struggle, I find deeper truths about what God is all about. And it's a struggle bus. There's other people aboard the struggle bus. And that gives us power and good news and community and a transformed way to live our life. So embrace struggle, keep it real. Remember a God of consolation. And, you know, if we're in struggle, we're struggle day after day after day after day, console yourself that there is more to learn. There is more to experience of the God of comfort. And lean into that. God, I have more to learn. I have more to experience of your consolation. So, and I think that's a place that we're at as in a society right now, our society right now. There's just so much pain and brokenness and, you know, so much has changed. And we can just, everything's going to hell in a handbasket, or our own personal health, or the loss of loved ones. But pause and think of how you have an opportunity to struggle. Struggle like Paul, struggle like Jesus, struggle like people of faith, and hopefully our church models a way to struggle. We're on a struggle bus together. And the struggle bus, maybe it's more like a magical mystery tour. You go out and look at fall leaves and stuff like that. Well, on our struggle bus, we keep it real. We keep it vulnerable. We keep it authentic so that more consolation can pour into our hearts. Our society needs people who have big jars of God consolation. So God's going to use our struggles, not just to heal us, but to give something away. And that's the good news, the good news. Oh, so much more is needed. Well, this morning, as we were doing Time for Discovery, we were practicing, what does this mean again? Struggle. And there was the observation that this looks like wheels. And then it got us thinking about a little song. When we struggle, God gives us a new song, because in struggle we learn new things about God. It pours into our hearts. So I'd like you to join me in singing a song if you know it. The wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round, round and round. The wheels on the bus go round and round, all over the town. The church on the bus says, what do we say? What do you think? Love, joy, peace. How about that? Should we try that? The people in the church say, love, joy, peace. Love, joy, peace. Love, joy, peace. The people in the church say, love, joy, peace. All through the town. Go, preach the good news. Amen.